Hey, Dee, what's with that article you sent me about granny hobbies?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. How many granny hobbies do you do?
Well, quite a few apparently. How many do you do?
I was kind of offended. I was like, granny hobbies, what the heck? And so
That's because you just turned 60, so you're not used to this idea that, we're older now.
this is what young people are calling these hobbies. But the funny part is they do it young, which is what I've always done. My whole life is one big granny hobby. Think about it. Gardening,
Yep,
baking,
sorta.
drinking tea.
All the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on. Hit that episode, the introduction, Dee.
Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on 7.5 acres out in the country.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelus because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening, and we want you to love it too, even if it is a granny hobby.
Exactly. Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Granny Dee.
Hello, Granny Carol. That is so funny. We should just change our names.
No.
Okay, I got... I'm just kidding. You know what? It was 54 degrees this morning.
You know what? It probably was pretty close to that here.
Oh my gosh, we're going to get up to 82 today, which is a little high, but I don't care. I'm just so happy it was 54. So what did you do in the garden this weekend?
So I'm going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Please do.
So the bad and the ugly is I hadn't been out to the vegetable garden for a couple of days, and I went out there the other day, and I looked at my cold crops, the broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. I bought 2 plants each.
I remember that.
They were just eaten to pieces by the little green worms. The cabbage butterflies laid a lot of eggs, and I thought, life's kind of too short for this. I chunked them all out and threw them away. No more.
So you kind of created a pollinator habitat, even though you didn't mean to, for cabbage butterflies.
Correct. That is correct. And I picked off a couple of them, the little green worms. And then I thought, these plants are too far gone. I yanked them. What else did I do? Oh, I also pulled out some Oriental bittersweet vine, which is invasive, and I know where the mother plant is. It's huge. So I wrote a blog post about that. The good is I ordered some fall blooming crocuses for the front garden from Brent and Becky's Bulbs. They had a sale. So those have already been shipped, should arrive today, tomorrow. Go right in the ground, and they will bloom yet this fall. And the neighbors will say, because I'm going to plant them in front, the neighbors will think, how does she get her crocuses to bloom in the fall? Aren't those a spring flower? And it'll be so fun. And that's what I did. Oh, wait, I did one other thing.
What's that?
Well, you convinced me. I bought a chainsaw, the battery-powered one.
Yay!
And I actually used it next door at my neighbor's to cut off a big limb that had been partially cut off, but the saw was too little to do the rest. It works like a charm.
I know. They're great, aren't they?
And I went to my nephew and his wife's house, met my sister over there, because they have a couple of shrubs that are just really too big in the front of the house, a couple of star magnolias. And so they wanted me to come over and cut those back because they're getting new siding and everything, and I did. And so they went from about 8 feet tall to about 4 feet tall.
Wow, by half. Wow.
And this is not the season to do that, but we wanted to do it
but
before the siding went on. And I says, all the blooms for next year are over there in that trash pile or in the brush pile that the city picks up. And I told my sister to tell her daughter-in-law, that it's like a 3 or 4 year process to bring a thing like the star magnolia from nearly 8 feet down to something sizable. And I says, we'll keep working on it. We'll have a nicely shaped small trees on the corner of their porches. So that was kind of fun.
Cool.
I took that first flop and I looked at my sister's face and she's like, What did you do?
It had to be done, man.
It had to be done. You just had to do it. So that was fun. Tell me about your garden.
Okay, so I worked all day Saturday in the garden and about killed myself. And I also worked several other days during the week. But I had a busy week too because I had 2 garden coaching clients last week and I got to go to Bustani. And believe it or not, I only bought 4 plants at Bustani.
Should we call 911?
I know, crazy, right? Although now I've realized that out front by the street, where I lost all of that Rudbeckia Goldsturm because the watering system wasn't working right.
I thought it's because you pulled it all out.
No, I pulled it all out and back. Okay. No, it died all by itself out front. And I was like, hallelujah. Yes, I was very happy. I probably should go back to Bustani and buy something for that spot. But
You probably should.
Oh, I probably should. They aren't open today. They open on Tuesday. And then on Saturday, I planted another lava lamp hydrangea. Remember I was going to pull out Bobo? And put the lava lamps in? Well, then Bobo decided to look good this year.
You know,
of course it did.
The Bobos that I moved, they look pretty good too. And I thought, I'm so glad I moved you there instead of the compost pile because you actually look pretty good.
Yeah, they look good this year, so go figure. So I put the lava lamps in another spot next to Calicarpa americana, which is American beautyberry. So we'll see how that goes. I planted 3 flats of pansies. I still have 1 left, but I was too tired.
Oh, that is wonderful.
I knew you'd be happy about that. I put mulch on the front borders around the pansies, and I also put the mums in terracotta pots because they look better.
That's true.
But after I did it, you know what I could have done, Carol? I could have just left them in their black pots, put some potting soil at the bottom of the big pots or something, heavy, and just set them in there, but I went ahead and planted them. So I may have to replant some later, but that's okay. Anyway, it was a good day, even though my muscles were tired and I took a whole day on Sunday to recover. It was a good day.
So I did make a trip over to the local greenhouse and I escaped without buying anything. I just was checking in on them on a couple of things, but they bought.
You feeling okay?
I was busy doing other things. I always stop on my way back from the library, and I had gone to the library.
You were busy playing with that new chainsaw. That's what you were doing.
Anyway, they had brought in pansies. They didn't grow their own. They're very difficult to grow in the fall because of the warmth.
They are.
And so they bring them in. And last year, like towards the end of the season, they had some left and they gave them to me. And this year, doggone it, almost everyone is sold. So I'm glad they sent me a text and I got my 4 flats worth because they've got like a flat and a half left and they don't think they can get any more. So go figure.
Oh boy. That's something else. You want to do the next quote and we'll go on to what our actual topic is today?
We have actual topics, people. Hang in there. Here it is. The goldenrod is yellow. The corn is turning brown. The trees in apple orchards with fruit are bending down. The gentian's bluest fringes are curling in the sun. In dusty pods the milkweed, its hidden silk has spun. And that's part of a poem by Helen Hunt Jackson called September. Very lovely.
Isn't it lovely? And doesn't it just evoke September?
It does.
And so our flower this week, I asked for us to do. Yes. Because I was confused. Even after all these years of gardening, I was confused. And so you're going to straighten me out.
So we're going to talk about the flower anemone. And I would like to take a moment of personal botanical geekness to let everybody know that these flowers are in the Ranunculaceae family, which includes columbine and clematis. So there are 2 that are most commonly grown in gardens. The one you're probably most familiar with, or maybe you're most familiar with all of them, is anemone blanda, which are commonly called windflowers. And this is a
Grecian windflowers.
Grecian windflowers. Obviously, It's not a native. Colors range from white to blue to pink. They're quite
pretty.
Yeah, quite charming in the mixed border. It is a bulb you plant in the fall. Yeah, only gets 4 to 6 inches tall.
Yeah, it's really short, but very pretty. I didn't get it to return well. I've grown it several times, and maybe I just had it in a place that was too wet, in summer. That's what I'm guessing, because, Greece, if they're truly from Greece.
A lot of the bulbs that we plant in the fall to bloom in the spring don't like to be wet in the summer.
Right, so you need to put them somewhere where they have good drainage but don't get a lot of water, which right now would be my garage border. It gets very little water.
So I have had them return for quite a number of years, and in fact, this is one of the few bulbs that I bought more of to plant this fall in the front border. I bought a bunch of blue ones. And so,
I love them because they are blue.
So you should go right now to buy the bulbs. And my recollection is the bulbs look like little rocks.
They do look like little rocks. You're absolutely right. Weirdly shaped stones.
Yes.
So I am familiar with those, and I'm also familiar with the other flower. But what I couldn't figure out, well, let's talk about the other flower. So I've never grown anemone hupahensis, which is Japanese anemones, right?
Yes, a Japanese anemone. And this, according to the Missouri Botanical Garden, and we'll link to their information about both of these, is this is one of those conundrums. It's easily grown in average, medium moist, well-drained soils in full sun to part shade. It likes consistently moist, humus-rich, neutral to slightly alkaline soil with good drainage. So it needs to be moist, but not wet. And it likes part shade. And it grows 3 to 4 feet tall. And if it gets too warm or hot in the summer, then the foliage can get burnt.
Right. I've seen it when you and I have been on garden comm trips.
Yes.
I've seen them in many gardens in many parts of the U.S. I want to say I saw them in Raleigh-Durham.
You probably did. I have
one. It's humid, right?
Yeah.
It could do well in moist shade there. So, but not moist, but not wet shade. Can these be somewhat invasive? Because I've read that in places.
Well, that's the conundrum of it. They are notoriously difficult to get them established. In other words, they're fussy about where you plant them. But if you find a good spot for them, they have fibrous suckering roots to form colonies over time. And when something forms a colony, it usually sort of takes out everything around it. Now,
like Rebecca Goldsturm, if it's happy.
I have
same idea.
I have the white one. It's called Honorine Jobert, I guess. We'll put the name in there.
You did that right. Good job.
Slow to establish. I have no concerns about it naturalizing whatsoever. It's just one plant. I think at one time I had 2, and now I have 1. So
right, but it's just a clump. Did it make a nice clump?
It's sort of a spindly flower right now. I actually took a picture because I thought, well, for our newsletter, we could put a picture of Honorine Jobert on there to show what it looks like. But anyway, I have no concerns about it naturalizing. And I did check. Brent and Becky's bulbs carries both the spring flowering windflower and the fall flowering Japanese anemone.
Well, I have to say I love the windflowers. I've grown them a few times.
And
they don't really love
they called
here,
windflowers
beautiful
because they're kind of on real thin little stalks, and they
blow.
They blow in the wind. There is a native one.
Oh, a native windflower? We have a native one?
Yeah, it's an Anemone canadensis. And I don't know much about it. It's called Canadian anemone or meadow anemone, and Prairie Moon Nursery, I found, of many sources, has it. Also, it's found more in river edges, but it likes consistently moist soil as well.
Okay, so it wouldn't like my garden. It's not consistently moist here ever. Maybe in May. That's the only time. Okay, well, that's interesting. And then you brought up a saltwater aquarium deal because you're funny. Well,
my dad used to have a saltwater aquarium years ago, but they had anemones in there, and it's described as a whimsical sea creature with a stunning display of color and entertainment. And so it has a symbiotic relationship with many animals, including the clownfish. Okay. So anyway, we're not talking about saltwater aquarium fish or anemones.
No, we are not.
We're talking about the plant anemones. But that's
yes.
Now, are you straightened out?
Yeah, I feel much better about this now because I would read about them in different places and I was like, wait a minute. I know about the Grecian windflowers and we've seen Japanese anemones probably in Buffalo too.
Probably.
We probably saw them out there, and they were big colonies. I remember thinking that there were a lot of, like when we've seen thalictrum. Thalictrum grows kind of in the same place
Yes.
and blooms about the same time.
Yes.
So
But
there you go.
The Japanese anemone is just now coming into full flower. So think about where you were at Garden Com in September, late September. That's where you would have seen it. I doubt we saw it actually blooming in Buffalo because we were there in August.
So although it might bloom in August in Buffalo, we don't know. No, it would start in September for sure.
For sure.
Well, then it was probably Raleigh-Durham because that's the only other place I can think of that would be consistently moist. We were in September. It was probably in the Duke garden, but who knows?
But
that's a long time ago.
our listeners probably like, okay, ladies,
Who cares?
move on. We don't care where you actually saw them. Dee's all straightened out. An enemy. It's kind of a tough word to say over and over. An enemy. Do the next quote.
It sounds like you're saying you have an enemy. All right, ready for the next quote?
Yes.
Autumn carries more gold in its pockets than all the other seasons. And this is by Jim Bishop. And he wrote a whole series of books, including The Day Christ Died and The Day Lincoln Died. I thought that was interesting.
He did. And he wrote them sort of as a journalist, almost an hour-by-hour account of that entire day. So interesting.
I've read The Day Christ Died.
I've read that one.
It was very interesting.
I think I'll read The Day Lincoln Died. I'll put it on my to-do list.
He wrote several. It was very interesting. So we're going to talk today. Sorry I coughed, but I don't want to say this title because we don't say that anymore. Do all plants need to be compact? Exactly.
Selections? Our title was going to be dwarf, but
dwarf is not considered kind anymore. And although we joke about language, I think this is a place where we should say compact.
But I thought about that, and dwarf in the plant world often refers to trees and shrubs that are reduced in size than their normal counterpart. But when you're talking about flowers and vegetables that are smaller, the generally favored term is compact.
Yeah, so I think they're going to start using that compact term for all of them eventually, because I've started getting stuff about shrubs where they talk about that too. But the point is, do all plants need to be short in stature and produce things on a very small plant? Because really compact means the plant is small and they've been working toward, and you're going to write a whole article on this, but they're working toward creating compact plants that produce a lot.
Yes.
So they can be grown in hanging baskets and stuff like that.
Yes. And so if you're gardening on 7.5 acres out in the country, a bunch of compact plants does you little good unless you want a little tiny container up on your deck where your granddaughter can play around. But as we said last week when I planted those peppers from heaven I didn't realize it was a compact plant because who reads labels, right? I'm like, oh, this belongs in a container up on the patio.
So there's another reason that they breed compact plants. They tell us it's because everybody's garden's smaller, because people grow things more in pots, et cetera, et cetera. But they can also put another whole layer of plants on a truck. And so
that's true. You can ship more.
You can ship more. And so it makes more money. So what brought this up is Angela at Plants Nouveau wrote a whole thing on about it. She sent us an email because she sends us emails periodically. And I thought, oh yeah, does everything need to be compact? No, it doesn't. And in fact, that takes me back yet again to the guy who grew Helenium, autumnal sneezeweed, and he had the national collection in England.
Right.
And one of his things is he's trying to keep this one particular Helenium in in commerce. He's trying to keep it in commerce because it's a big, tall, beautiful selection, but it isn't sold anywhere because it's too hard. For one thing, tall plants, whether it's vegetable or a plant like a perennial, it takes longer for them to produce their crop.
Yes.
Be it flowers or tomatoes or whatever. And ideally, for indeterminate tomatoes, that's one of the ideal things about it is that they produce over a long series.
Right.
And the whole reason we have tomatoes that are determinate is because somebody needed to can them.
Right.
And that's the first determinate tomato. So it just depends on what you need.
Exactly. And so if you want to plant a garden and you're expecting to haul in a huge harvest so that you can can and freeze and preserve, and basically like my grandmother, if they didn't have a big garden and do all that, they didn't eat all winter. You're going to need regular sized plants in a regular sized garden. But if you just are a hobby gardenist and you just want a little bit of taste of stuff, then the compact plants may be just your speed.
Okay, so you said that you bought Tomato Heartbreaker. I saw Tomato Heartbreaker, which is one of my favorite plants, by the way. It's adorable. I saw it when they were trialing it at California Spring Trials in 2015, which was really cool because it was the first time I'd ever seen such a cute little heart-shaped tomato, and I love the name.
And my little plants in a container didn't get more than 8 inches tall. I think they can get bigger. Small. And I bought it because I was at a greenhouse and, this lady was telling me how her dad had just died. He had run the greenhouse for, 40, 50 years. And they were trying to keep it growing. I looked down and there's Tomato Heartbreaker. And I thought, I think I'll buy that. And
well, it is adorable. Did it make really cute little heart-shaped cherry tomatoes?
It did. Now, it didn't get as good a care as maybe some people might have given it. But it did produce some tomatoes. They were fine. They were kind of heart shaped, which is they were cute. But would I buy it again? I don't know. I actually have a full size garden, so I don't generally seek out compact plants.
I don't either, but I know some people just love them, and we've talked about these books before. The Micro-Food Gardening Projects and Plants for Growing Fruits and Veggies in Tiny Spaces. That was by Jim McGinnis. And if you do want small plants that produce small cutesy pie crops, that would be a good book to read.
Yes. She has tons of little projects in there so you can build little raised beds and things. So, but she actually grew up in Queens, I think, where nobody has a big spot to garden.
No. And it is fun to garden with vegetables, like using them like houseplants, sort of.
Yeah.
Although maybe outside. It just depends. Some people grow them inside too, but that's another whole topic and it's complicated. And then you also listed Gardener's Guide to Compact Plants, Edibles, and Ornamentals for Small Space Gardening by Jessica Walliser. We know both of these women, and they're both really good writers.
They are.
And I think they're both good books. I just don't grow very many tiny plants. I was trying to think of anything. I don't have any tiny vegetables.
Well, what's tiny that grows well in containers that I don't know if you're growing them in containers. Many of the herbs like basils and thyme and oregano and all that, you can grow those as small plants in a container.
Yeah, that one basil. There's a couple of micro basils.
Yep.
That make really cute little tiny shrubs, and they're really cute. They're not shrubs really because they're not woody, but they kind of look like little tiny boxwoods. And some people take those and then they turn them into topiary.
That takes a lot of work. I'll tell you,
that takes a lot of work.
A basil that didn't stay compact, I am amazed by its size in a container. And that's that blue African basil that you told me to get.
Oh my gosh, it gets huge.
Mine is over 3 feet tall.
Yeah, mine's huge too. And they're in raised beds and they're dwarfing everybody else. I've got to decide next year. I still want them, but I don't want so many. They took up a lot of space this year.
So that is compact plants. Well worth considering for smaller space gardens, or also if you just don't have a lot of time, because then they don't take as much time once you get them planted.
And you're gardening for the sake of gardening.
Yes.
Not so much for produce.
That's correct. All right, let me do this next quote. Didn't I do the quote before? Did we mix up the order? Did you do the quote
before?
No, you did.
No, I did the one before. It's your turn.
All right. I like getting my hands in the soil as much as I like rubbing butter into flour to make pastry. Sometimes there's bread dough under my fingernails, sometimes manure. Some, truth be told, there's a bit of both. Nigel Slater. So I thought, this is really, you pulled this quote out of the book on the bookshelf.
I did. And I can't remember how I found this book. It was sort of a rabbit hole. The book is called Tender, A Cook in His Vegetable Patch by Nigel Slater. And it must have been referred to in another book I had. I have to say, I've really, really enjoyed this book. I showed you right before we went on where I had highlighted several pages. Nigel Slater lives in London, and he has a vegetable patch, or he did have a vegetable patch, but I think he still lives in the same place. He's pretty famous. We didn't know who he was, but we went and looked him up, and he's famous. He's written all kinds of books on gardening.
He has.
Who knew? But here's why I like this book. So as I've said before, I'm always looking for books that treat vegetables as stars of the table.
Yes.
Because at this point in my life, even though I like meat and I eat it, I am not as interested in it as I am in vegetables. And he does a really good job. It kind of reminds me of our other favorite book, The Chef's Garden, right? Isn't that the name of it?
Yeah. I refer to The Chef's Garden every week.
I love The Chef's Garden. I'm so grateful we bought it. Thank goodness we went to the library first. So this is similar in that he talks about a particular vegetable, and he will say, this is the vegetable in the garden. And then he will talk about, this is the vegetable in the kitchen. So he starts out with, let me start with the deal here. So let's say carrots. So he starts out talking about carrots and how he grows them and why carrots matter and all that. And then he talks about how to grow the carrot in the garden, right? And then he does a little carrot diary. So for each vegetable that he grows, he talks about a diary of how it worked for him. Now, bear in mind, he's in England, so it's different.
So a carrot diary, does that go, Dear Garden, today my roots have grown a little deeper. I'm trying very much not
the carrot's point of view.
Oh, I'm sorry. You said a carrot diary. I'm just wondering, today I almost flowered, but the gardener pulled me out. Finally, I get to achieve my destiny.
You're personifying carrots. Nobody will want to eat them if you do that.
I know, but never mind. Go back to the book. I'm thinking I might write a book of never mind.
Of vegetables from their point of view. No one's going to want to read that. All right, so varieties. He talks about varieties. Then he talks about it in the kitchen. Then he talks about various ways to season carrots, which is, and it doesn't matter what vegetable it is, right?
Oh, yeah.
So he'll do that. And then he talks about different weird things about carrots, like you can grow them from the roots or whatever. And then there are beautiful photos of said carrots being cooked. And then he has, I'm going to show this to Carol. You guys will just have to follow along in your minds. So that is a beautiful pot of carrot soup, right?
Beautiful, yes.
It's the most beautiful orange, right?
Why do we review books like this right before lunch, Dee?
I don't know. I'm so hungry. I've been hungry since I woke up this morning. And then he has recipes after that. And they're all different kinds, from carrot soup to, say, carrot and cilantro fritters. I'm telling you, it's a good book. I've been very, very pleased with it. I bought it used. It is not a brand new book. And it's kind of expensive if you buy it new. But if you buy it used, it is not. So that's my book review this week of Nigel Slater's Tender, A Cook and His Vegetable Patch.
And I think I might get it. It looks to be about the same size as The Chef's Garden.
It's a smaller, you know what I mean? It's smaller in size, but just as thick.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Good detailed information about everything.
I'm going to check it out.
Oh, it's time for me to do the quote now.
It is.
Boy, we got this out of balance. Autumn is the mellower season. What we lose in flowers, we more than gain in fruits. Samuel Butler.
True that. Nothing like going to an orchard in the fall to pick apples.
Yep. I love our dirt this week.
Yes.
I watched it again. It made me happy.
So the Better Homes and Gardens magazine is turning 100. And the CBS Sunday Morning Show did a very lovely
that was sweet.
Documentary video segment on them. And it just, it's like that for a magazine to endure for 100 years. And obviously it's more than just a magazine now. There are all the cookbooks and
the whole Meredith Publishing empire, which has changed a lot in the last
It has.
last
I did not
few
realize
years.
they had been purchased.
They've been purchased, and they were purchased by an online company called Dot Dash. And I did not know that until Stephen Orr talked about it on the interview.
I have never heard of Dot Dash.
I've not either, but I think they're behind a bunch of big brands online. But I didn't go investigate it because it was not a rabbit hole, and I don't care that much. What I did care about was, I know why they bought Better Homes and Gardens. I really think I know why.
Because, well, you put it in the show notes. You said it's because they have a really good interactive website.
Yeah, they were the first magazine company, in my opinion, to really invest in their web presence for gardening and homemaking. Now, a lot of others have since then done it, but I don't know if they've done it as well as BHG did. And I did a little bit of writing for one of BHG's subsidiaries for online work. And one of the best things that BHG did from the very beginning is they did those galleries.
Yes.
Like top 10 plants for fall. I'm just making one up, but I'm sure there is one like that on there. And it's a gallery, so you have to punch each picture to advance. And all the internet stuff is about how long do you keep people on your website.
And isn't the Meredith Corporation, aren't they behind magazines like The Pioneer Woman and Magnolia? Aren't those published through Meredith?
I think Magnolia is. I can't speak to the Pioneer Woman's magazine. I don't read it, but I've got Magnolia right here because I really enjoyed the latest.
Well, you don't have to go
one.
get it, but they're more than Better Homes and Gardens. And here's a little piece of trivia for you, Dee. I have toured the garden that they showcased at the beginning of the little segment and met the gardener, Sandra. I went through there.
Garden.
Yeah, the test garden. And that is a beautiful place and so well done. And she said, you know, they have little areas where they can do photo shoots and things. And so, you know, they have to really think about what they're planning because they kind of plant by the editorial calendar. But it is so well done. And, you know.
So they did that. They did their, they have a test garden and a test kitchen.
The test kitchen, I'd be fat as a cow if I worked there at that.
There's no way I could work there. And then, but it made me really sad when I saw the garden because back in 2015, I got the chance to tour Sunset's trial garden and their trial kitchen because they were the other magazine that had their own just within their property, and they were bought by, I want to say they were bought by Time and then sold off because their property was worth so much money and their building had been designed by a famous California architect. So I saw that test garden and I said, oh my gosh, that was just like Sunset's. All done by the editorial calendar.
It is open to the public at various times. You'd have to check their website. It is a walled garden, so it's completely surrounded by a brick wall, but it's fairly large. And like I said, so well done and so well tended. Very impressive.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And I remember her. She's a neat gardener. So that's our dirt this week.
All right. Here's the next quote. Take us into the rabbit holes.
You do the quote.
If a year was tucked inside a clock, then autumn would be the magic hour. Victoria Erickson.
I kind of want that on a plaque.
Really? Because I want the quote from last week on a plaque. Did you see that I named our episode last week after the quote I liked?
You know what? I didn't clue into that. Sometimes I don't clue in.
A good garden may have some weeds.
I would say it does have some weeds for sure, right?
Yes.
So you do our rabbit hole because we're in the same rabbit hole because you dragged me down with you.
Oh my gosh. And there was a woman in my garden club had suggested this as a program, which it's not a program. But we discovered Hopwood Hall in England and the book Downton Shabby by Hopwood Dupree. And this is a rabbit hole. So very briefly.
It's a hilarious rabbit hole.
Very briefly, Hopwood Dupree grew up in Holland, Michigan, and moved to Hollywood to pursue his lifelong dream. He was an actor and a producer. He's looking up his genealogy, and he discovers that what he thought was a fictitious place that his grandfather told him about, Hopwood Castle, turned out to be a real place called Hopwood Hall, and it was 5 to 10 years from being a pile of rubble if somebody didn't step in and start
it's a piece of
putting it back together. So
It is
Hopwood
the
didn't know
biggest
this.
pile of crap I've ever seen in my life.
So
but it's
Hopwood,
huge.
I know, Hopwood is a character. So he gets
Yes.
his family to go over to they went over for a sad reason, to scatter his father's ashes in Normandy. And then they said, let's take a side trip to see our ancestral home. The townspeople were so excited that an ancestor had shown up. They really needed an ancestor to take over this project. And so the spell was cast upon Hopwood Dupree, and he couldn't resist. And he ended up going back and started working with the local town council and everybody, and sold his home in L.A. and moved to England. And yeah, Dee, tell him about this house.
Oh my gosh, the Himalayan balsam.
Oh yeah,
Oh my gosh,
the house
That
needs
was
a
like,
ton of
help
work,
me.
but so does
Yeah.
the garden. But they've done some amazing things.
They have. Let's not say. I mean, really, he's been there now he got there before the pandemic.
He got there around
And-
2016 is when things started cooking. So he's been at
Yeah.
it for 5 or 6 years. They have a local garden club that has kind of taken ownership of the grounds, and they showed some of the before and after, and they cleaned up a lot of the scrub around the house that was growing.
Well, the gardens were gone. I mean,
Yeah, they're essentially
the
gone.
formal gardens were just simply gone, and they had to dig them out and find the outlines again.
Yes.
And it was that was one of my favorite episodes, was where the people from the garden club, he kind of went through the whole year of what they had done together. And it was, I mean, it's a good thing that Hopwood is very good at producing videos, because they're very funny.
Yes.
They're so funny.
And-
But it's kind of got a serious message too, which
Yes.
is about taking care of things.
Well, and he said, the thing is, when you're restoring a place like Hopwood Hall that goes back to the 1400s sections of it, and it's in such poor condition, it's going to take, he's realizing this is a lifelong project. This is going to take decades. But as long as they keep showing progress, and there's various foundations that will donate money, they can get grants and stuff, but they have to be working towards something. And he's working towards turning in this to a retreat center where artists can come in, work, or they can have concerts. It's a place for the community to come back because
because this place was the centerpiece of their community. That was
was.
part of the deal. And so their little town has really gotten behind him. He also has a Patreon channel that if you want to join, if you really get into it, he has a lot of people there. He gets a lot of grants. He works really hard. They all work really hard. And having redone my own home, I know some of the stuff they're doing, and I'm just like, you guys are really cool. Anyway, I loved it.
But anyway, there's the episode of Finding Bees in the Walls. You'll have to watch those episodes.
I haven't gotten there yet, but I figured that was coming.
The episode where, they have to go out into the woods to try to figure out where they were digging the clay to make the bricks. Because also this historic England and these different people that give you money, they want it done authentically. So you have to figure out how to make the lime and mortar that they used to point the bricks. You can't just go to the hardware
Can't buy
store.
bricks from China? Oh.
No. So there's an episode where the Himalayan balsam is an invasive there.
That's
Horrible.
all through the
horrible.
woods.
All through the woods.
Because most of these places, had formal gardens, then they had a meadow, they often had a deer park, and they often had woods. And
That's true.
The balsam in the woods was, they'll never get rid of all of it, but they can sure work on it. Anyway, the book is Downton Shabby by Hopwood Dupree.
And he wrote this. He did come back to the United States in 2020 with the pandemic. And while he was here, he did write the book, the story of what happened. And when you read the story, and I listened to the audiobook version this weekend and finished it, it gives you a better appreciation for what he's doing. And he's really thinking about the long term. But he said something in there that made me think of you and your granddaughter.
Oh, yeah? What was that?
Well, he gets invited to these other country homes, and he meets people that have gone through similar rehabilitation of their properties, which is
Sure.
reassuring to him that it can be done. But some lady, somebody or something said he needed kids to live in the hall. And, and he said in the book, he'd hope someday that he could get married and have kids. Now, he's in his early 50s now, but
Yeah, he's not young.
she said if you get children interested and imprint upon them the memory of the place, then they'll take over to keep it going when you're gone. And I was thinking
So you
about,
think Maddie could just take over my garden?
well, I don't know if Maddie can take over your garden, but we certainly do try to encourage the kids to be in gardens like yours, like mine. So then they're a little bit more invested in making sure it's kept up nice.
I think that's true. And I was laughing because earlier you said, you could grow these out on the deck where your granddaughter plays. And I was like, my granddaughter plays all over this property. She runs around like a maniac. In fact, I had a little story about her on Instagram telling
Cool.
us, come on, friends, come on.
And then for Halloween, there's even a ghost in the hall, by the way.
Ooh.
Woo!
Okay. So what are your garden commissions this week?
All right, so my fall blooming crocuses will arrive and I will get them directly planted into the ground. I got to do some more garden cleanup a little every day. I am a very busy person this week, Dee. I don't know how it happens, but I must keep the weeds at bay. I saw some mulberry weed that had grown almost 18 inches tall and I yanked it out and said, bad weed. You're going to the trash.
It's so bad. I'm still pulling it everywhere. All right, I'm going to plant that last flat of pansies out front, and then I'm going to write a blog. Pansies. And then I'm actually going to go, I don't know why I said it that way. I'm going to run over to Terracotta, which is the nursery in Guthrie, Oklahoma, and pick up some more pansies for right out my kitchen door, which leads me into the blog post I'm going to write this week about garden tips to enjoy your garden, things to enjoy it.
Very good.
And then get the rest of the shrubs in. I'm almost done. And the daylilies planted. And then I'm going to mulch. The end.
The end. Well, there's no temperature above the 60s in my forecast for the next 5 days.
Oh, 80s here, but that's okay.
All right, that's it. We want to thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week, Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
If you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. That helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your gardening friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
And please subscribe to our new Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelist, at substack.com, which is also linked to in our show notes on Buzzsprout. But you can listen to the episode directly if you
can.
Subscribe.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we're in a small commission, and it costs you nothing.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the garden gate today. Bye until next week.
Goodbye, everybody.